Hello and welcome to the Crown Hill Podcast. This is Patrick Sebecki. I'm here with Mark Luby, and today... Sorry, Mark.
That's good.
You can say hi.
Hey.
Today we're also joined by our wives, Tina Sebecki and Hannah Luby. How are you both doing?
So good.
So good. We were sick, but we're better now.
Oh,
We're getting better.
We're on the way. I still have a cough.
Last time you and I were on the podcast,
You had a cough.
We just wait till Hannah's sick.
On the tail end with the cough.
we schedule it a month out, knowing that Hannah's going to be sick. I wish we scheduled a podcast about that. One day maybe. But until then. So last time we started this series on what are going to be distinctives about our church. And we talked through Reformed theology, how that's just unique to us. And if you want to hear more about that, we did an over-hour podcast on it. But today we're getting to our second distinctive, which is complementarianism. And I just wanted to ask, how would you guys define complementarianism?
That's a big question.
Thanks. We try.
Yes.
I have a definition. I'll throw
Perfect. Go.
Great.
Do it.
So I would say, when I think about complementarianism, I'm thinking about the reality that men and women are made in the image of God as image bearers, so equal in dignity, value, worth, and yet complementary in the way that God has made us physically embodied in ways that plays out in personality or person, like your characteristics, things like that on other levels as well. So that men and women are complementary in the way that they're created. So complementary is like peanut butter and jelly are complementary. They go great together. If you disagree, then I'm sure you could have your own pairing, peanut butter and chocolate. And if you disagree with that, then you probably are allergic to peanut butter, and we understand. And so almond butter and chocolate is also good.
Pity, but understand.
Yeah, we understand. Don't do it if you're allergic at this point. But it's the idea of going together. And so when we talk about complementarity, a lot of times the discussions, and we'll get into this, in our current culture, center around the idea of authority. And I think that is part of it, like the way that God has designed men to be leaders in the home, in the church, in various ways. But that is not the whole of what we're talking about. So we're not merely talking about authority structure. We're talking about the wholeness of God's embodied reality of male and female as complementary in the ways that he's given characteristics and wirings to men and women that are specifically different, both made in the image of God, but reflecting differently part of God's nature and reality through our male and female embodiness and the ways that plays out in our world. So that's a somewhat of a definition, a 17-sentence definition that ChatGPT could make into a one sentence.
Yep.
What did it say when you asked ChatGPT?
For complementarianism, the core belief is very similar, actually, to Mark said. It says that men and women are equal in value and dignity, but have distinct complementary roles given by God. So roles was a big thing that I kept talking about. Mm-hmm. So roles and authority would probably be like the two biggest differences between that and the other versions.
And shout out to ChatGPT today.
Yeah.
Unexpected, but shout out.
It came through.
Oh, man. I think that's helpful. I think one of the ways I even want to distinguish that even further is I think the roles conversation is good, the authority conversation is good, but I think even beyond that, I think saying complementarianism as a distinctive for us means that the reality of maleness and femaleness affects all of life.
Yeah.
That it actually inflects everything about how we're human, so that there is one humanity, but there are two types of human, and that it radically changes the way your humanness happens based on whether you're male or female. And I think that for me is the bigger thing, and this is one of the ways this is referred to as broad or thick complementarianism, where it's like, okay, the difference between men and women is so real that it affects everything about life. For men and women.
And can you clarify thin complementarianism with that?
Yeah, and so thin complementarianism on the other side is saying the difference is real, but it only affects certain things. Like it only affects what position of authority women can hold in the church or in the home. Mm-hmm. Like, it only affects very certain things, is what a thin complementarian would say. And so even to say, like, now I'm making a distinction not just between the complementarians and people who would say, oh, well, men and women aren't actually different in the roles they can pursue, which is an egalitarian position. But now I'm saying, okay, there's actually a difference between us who say there's a thick complementarity, that gender affects everything about human life, versus people who are thin complementarians who would say, well, the difference is real, but it only affects these one or two areas.
And I think why that's important is, I think an issue you end up with in complementarianism is you say men and women can do everything in the church the same, just women can't be pastors.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if what is being talked about is the pastoral role only in that position of authority, you're kind of missing something. Because it's like, there's something that men actually cannot do in the church, and that is be a spiritual mother. Like, in the truest sense, Paul uses that imagery as a nursing mother. But there is a need for men and women to come with the unique way that God has created them to actually use their personality, use their giftings, use their characteristics for the blessing and edification of the church. And I think that when you get a thick complementarianism, one of the things that helps do is it actually focuses more on that reality.
Yeah. What are some places in the scriptures you guys go to when you think about this doctrine, or this distinctive?
I personally love the really challenging one of 1 Timothy 2.
Way to go. The deep end. I love it. Let's go.
Well, because that is the one that's like the hardest for me to wrestle through, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's just one that is the one that's probably the most talked about, because it just says, like, women are not meant to teach. Thank you for pulling that. Yeah, that where did it go? Your text is so small. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. Which is ironic, because I'm talking right now. But we're not. Anyways. Just the idea, like, that's really a hard thing as a woman to hear. Of, like, so does my voice not matter? Does that mean I have less dignity? You know, like, those are just a lot of the questions that come through with just taking that single verse out of context. And so I've spent a lot of time, especially in, like, the last 2 years, thinking about this verse, working through it with other women, with you guys, and just realizing that there's actually, I think kind of what you guys are talking about is just there's a difference between men and women, but there's still a place for women and a need for women in the church, in the family of God, in the household, and that it doesn't mean my words don't matter or don't hold as much weight, but that there's just a different role that the Lord has called women to.
Yeah. And even a question, follow-up, Tina, of what do you think that verse is specifically trying to get at? Because obviously you have, like, we're all for you being on the podcast sharing. It's not like you're not allowed to talk, have a voice, you know.
Yeah.
So what does that mean as you hear it?
Yeah, well, I do think, now I'm all nervous that I'm going to have this wrong. We've talked about it so much that, especially in the church that Timothy was talking to, there was a lot of just women who were speaking against truth and like trying to dominate over the men in the church, and they weren't necessarily like speaking the gospel or the truth. And so Paul is really talking to, like, the women who are trying to bring decisiveness, and that they're not meant to, like, be teaching, but also, like, that he goes back to, because after that he goes to the creation story, that for Adam was formed first, and then Eve. And I just listened to a whole thing about, like, Adam was not deceived. It doesn't mean he was innocent in the garden, but that there was a reason the serpent chose the woman to deceive. And that was undermining God's design for Adam to be the leader. But when the serpent chose the woman to be the one to eat of the fruit, that she was taking leadership in that role of, like, going against God. And so how it just twisted God's design in that too. And so I think, like, you need that whole section of, like, Paul is going back to the creation too, of how men were created to be in leadership, to have responsibility over creation, and that that includes in the church, and that that women still play a role. Obviously, we had a role in Eve. She's the one who deceived, and that we all fall into that sin, the way that through one man sin entered into the world, and through one man there's salvation through Jesus. So, like, it means all of us. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think the way that you're grounding it too, and because people will look at it and they'll say it's only for Ephesus in First Timothy, but the interesting thing is, like you pointed out, Paul's going to go back to the fall. He's going to go back to creation. So two things: creation and the fall.
Yes.
About man being created first. Verse 13 of chapter 2: For Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. First Timothy 2 has a lot of hard things to work through.
Yes.
And then chapter 3 is about elders. And First Timothy 2 is in the context of proper worship. And so I think, even for us, I think how we're approaching that is the authoritative teaching that I think Paul is getting at is not just a woman should not speak, as much as this authoritative teaching. I would liken to the role of an elder, or a pastoral type of role, because that's what he's going to go on in First Timothy 3. Is he's actually going to give qualifications for pastors and clarify that. And so I think even that's why it's like, okay, well, what does it mean? It's like, we're not taking that to mean, I don't think that means that women never speak. There's no context for that. But that there's a type of authoritative teaching which is prohibited from 1 Timothy 2:12, which, like we said, is a cultural sticking point.
And I think of like one way that we'll discuss this as we get into it is like a general way to define masculinity and femininity is that men tend to build walls that women fill with life. And I think that's true even doctrinally, that what Paul is pointing to here, that there's a structure of sound doctrine that men are given to keep and to hold and build up well. I think this is I think there's a gendered aspect to theology in a lot of ways, because I think that's part of maleness in a lot of these ways. Not only in the responsibility, but even in the way that just maleness plays itself out. I think there's a reality to that. And I think that's one of the ways you're seeing that play out here. And we can get into that conversation in lots of different ways. But I think that's part of what you're seeing here.
In First Timothy.
Yes.
Hannah, did you have any texts that you were wanting to go to that have been significant for you in this conversation?
Yeah, actually, this relates really well, because Patrick's just talking about how, like, beauty, like, women, like, they create life and beauty, and so it's like, and men are, like, holding fast to a doctrinal truth, and then women make that truth beautiful. And so the text that I wanted to share was 1 Peter 3, and I'm going to read the whole bit.
Do it.
Great. It says, "Likewise, wives, be subject to your own husbands, so that even if some do not obey the word, they may be won without a word by the conduct of their wives, when they see your respectful and pure conduct. Do not let your adorning be external, the braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry, or the clothing you wear, but let your adorning be the hidden person of the heart, with the imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which in God's sight is very precious. For this is how the holy women who hoped in God used to adorn themselves, by submitting to their own husbands, as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. And you are her children, if you do good, and do not fear anything that is frightening." And what I love about this is it talks about, like, first of all, there's wives with unbelieving husbands who win them over by making the truth of Christ beautiful. But then, particularly the last two verses of that section, I'm talking about, like, Sarah as this example of biblical submission. But then the last sentence, "You are her children if you do good and do not fear anything that's frightening." I felt like in my thinking on this topic is like the Lord understands it's not easy. Like, he's not like, oh, like, you should just submit and be so, like, easy and, like, you know, natural, but it's like, oh, like, biblical submission is hard. And it's a picture of Christ in the church for a wife to submit to her husband. And so this verse is like, don't fear. And so it takes courage. And so that's just something that I have found like so encouraging, is that like complementarianism is something that is beautiful and like can be hard. Just like for a woman it can be hard to submit, for a man it can be hard to lead by sacrificing, like servant leadership. Because it's like the man who's called to lead, like he's called to be the one who goes hungry first. He's called to be the one who steps in front of, someone with a gun first. He's the one who's called to lead by sacrificing himself in the way that he's following Christ, and then the woman is called to follow Christ by sacrificing herself in like submitting to and respecting her husband.
That's good. That's good.
Not at all. I mean, I think you didn't. I'm just going to read the next section for husbands, just because we're just going to hit the hard text first. Let's just hit hard.
And you need both.
Yeah. You need it.
Sections.
So this is 1 Peter 3, starting in verse 7.
The verse right after.
Right after what Hannah read. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. And what I love about this text is it's saying husbands need to realize that their wife, as a woman, is a different kind of human.
Yeah.
That you have to interact with differently. And they're the same heirs to the same grace of life in Christ. So there's it's this incredible distinction of they're different, and you have to acknowledge the difference, and you have to acknowledge their equality before God with you as heirs of life. And then this last line, I actually think it's the most terrifying threat in the Bible.
Yeah.
Because the last line of this is, so that your prayers may not be hindered. So I would like for a man to not understand the inherent differences between him and his wife and not live in understanding that means that God will not hear your prayers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's wild to me. It's like God will actually shut you out for not caring for your wife in the ways that she needs to be cared for.
Which is different than the way you need to be cared for as a husband.
Yeah, as a husband and as a man.
And the term used there, like weaker vessels, some have interpreted that to mean only physical strength. So like the woman is physically weaker, and that's why it's used there. I don't think that's a helpful interpretation, because I don't think that's a helpful view of humanity. I think it just shortens the idea of you can just be physically different, but similar internally in all those ways. It almost strikes of Gnosticism.
Well, actually, that in Western culture doesn't come from Christian sources. It comes from post-Christian Enlightenment sources. Guys like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire, and Immanuel Kant, who write these books on the fairer and weaker sex of woman. And if you look into any of the lives of those men, they're terrible to the women.
Oh,
they actually know.
Rousseau is like a dumpster fire. Dumpster fire is too kind.
It's too kind.
As a father.
He's just the worst. And so it's even and that's the hard part about this conversation is we're entering in to a very real culture that's had very real problems, as every culture has, with the relationships between men and women.
Yeah.
And so it's when we read Weaker Vessel, it's we just hear all these echoes of bad Western culture that actually aren't, that are coming from guys who are explicitly rejecting Christianity.
So what does it mean?
Yeah,
Weaker vessel.
we tore something down. Let's build something up.
All right. Yeah. What does it mean? You had started.
I mean, I'll give my common understanding of how I see it, and I'd love input from others, but I would take it to be that there's a difference between male and female that is on a biological level, but is on the wholeness of our level. So I think about, here's a practical example. If I think that I can interact with Hannah in the same way that I can have an argument with Patrick. Now, in all fairness, there's huge differences personality-wise.
Yeah.
There aren't just male and female, but are also male and female. I I will destroy my capacity to have a real argument and conversation with Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, as I approach Hannah in a conversation, where this is our personality, sure, and I know that every woman is not the same, but there's a kindness, a patience, a gentleness that I think I should lead with as a husband. So that when I bring up an issue, I'm not just saying, Hannah, you need to figure this out. Not that I've never done that. Like, I've repented of that. Like, I have been angry. You know, like, I have failed this verse at times. It's like there's a gentleness I need to come with, understanding that there's a goodness to a sensitivity that you may have to what I have to say. And also, like, that thing with, like, beauty. Like, there might be a sensitivity, but there's also a strength in that sensitivity. There's like a strength in that care. And so just knowing that we are biologically different, like physically, we are very different, the ways that we interact with the world, like even like the number of hours of sleep we need are different.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
so different.
And part of that is having kids, you know, and those things. But
before kids, I slept way more than that.
And so just like, and again, it's like some people may vary on that, but it's like there are differences that we notice as we're married to one another. And there's exceptions to rules, which is what makes, you know, that's, anyways,
I think.
Yeah, but go for it.
Well, I think there's this beautiful example a friend from RTS has given of, like, okay, there's a old woman in a hospital who's dying, and she's visited by her pastor, who's a man, and she's visited by another woman from the congregation. And the pastor comes in. This is a hypothetical, by the way. The pastor comes in and he, like, sits there. He, like, holds this woman's hand and prays for her. He encourages her with the truth of Scripture. And then the woman from the church comes in and she sits on the bed and she wraps her arm around the woman. And she says, "You're going to be with Jesus." She braids her hair. She cares for her. And it's like, the beauty of those two different ministries that they could not replace the other. This woman who's in need of ministry, like, she needed both. She needed the pastor to come in and do what he did, and she needed the woman to come and do what she did. And they're very different.
Yeah.
And the woman from the church had the strength and ability to minister to that woman in the hospital bed in a way that the pastor could never do. And the pastor had a way to minister to that woman that the woman from the church could never do. They're both so needed. And it's like something we like to talk about, like spiritual fathers and spiritual mothers. Like, both are needed. When we don't have one or the other, the family of God is parentless.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I've said, just going along with the spiritual fathers, spiritual mothers, is we need spiritual mothers, we need spiritual fathers, and a child will be impoverished if they don't have both of those. So, in our own home, like, if a child does not have a father and a mother, they will be impoverished. Now, there are situations where you can't help that, and you grow up with a single parent, and the parent loves and cares for the child, and the Lord works in that. And there's defects in all parents, but there's a value in a father and mother raising a child, and we know that. And the same is true in the church. There's a value in having spiritual fathers, spiritual mothers, spiritual brothers, spiritual sisters, that actually is needed for your edification. So the one way I've said it is, when we think about complementarian, one of the issues that people have is particularly the authority. And I think authority is part of it, and we've talked some about that. But when I think about my role as a husband, my main responsibility with Hannah and our son William is not to make sure that Hannah does not rule as the father. Like, that's not, like, the main thing I'm doing. I'm not just, like, gatekeeping, like, Hannah, I feel like you're coming into my areas of authority. That's, like, just an insecure dude always, like, wondering if she's going to try and usurp my authority or something. That's not our interaction. My number one role that I think about is, how do I help Hannah flourish as the mother, as my wife? And how do I care for her, serve her, so that the life that she has is flourishing? And that's how I think of sacrificial leadership. It's like, how can I use the strength and the giftings the Lord has given me to sacrifice and care for my wife, so that she might be built up and edified? Yeah, I think that's.
Sorry. It's on Do Not Disturb, but I came through because it's my mom.
Totally.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, we're on a podcast. Say hi. Just kidding, I didn't pick up.
But even I appreciate that comment of it's not a competition for leadership. And the way I've thought through that even is in Ephesians 5:23, it says, "For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior." And what was pointed out to me by one of my professors, Joe Rigney, was that isn't the husband should be. It's just a statement of fact. The husband is the head. And the reality of every marriage, then, is that the husband is the head, regardless of what you believe. It just means that there are probably a lot of husbands that aren't acting as the head they ought to be.
Yeah. And so this is where you get the hot take, and I'm fine with this, is there is no egalitarian marriage in reality.
Yeah.
Because it's ontological.
Yeah.
And what I mean is it's the nature. There are marriages where there might be a breakdown in leadership.
Yes.
But at the basis, it's not as though you can truly say, hey, that's not how we're going to operate.
And that text is really hard for us to get around. And it's grounded in creation. It's grounded in the fall. And it seems okay, this is the way God has designed men and women, not just to live together, but also to flourish. So even as you think about that, why is complementarianism something you see people flourishing in?
Hannah gets to go first this time.
Great. Well, I think about living into God's design leads to flourishing. But then particularly, you see, we've been talking about spiritual mothers and fathers, that leads to flourishing. We're not trying to go against our God-given design. And to be spiritual mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters. But also, them, the family of God is not impoverished. It has the full richness of human relationship that God designed it to have. And the full beauty of the diversity that God intended. So with Adam and Eve, you see the diversity of Adam as a man and Eve as a woman, yet diversity and unity. They're unified in their marriage. And so that's an image of it's a wonderful beauty. And so when we try to have just one or the other, we lose out on the diversity and unity. How God brings diverse peoples into unity. And so I think that it does bring flourishing to have that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love it when people ask Patrick and I what complementarianism looks in our relationship. Because there's never been a point where it's just I have to just grit my teeth and submit. That's not what it's like in a marriage, which I'm so grateful for.
The joke is that sometimes we're just a patriarchy.
Yeah. No.
We're not.
But also, at the same time, I do believe you are the head of the house,
Amen.
which would make us a patriarchy, which makes it a patriarchy. Anyway, you make it as a joke, but if you break it down, it's true.
Yeah.
But just the idea of I got so off topic with that comment. Now I'm trying to
sorry.
refocus on about
What
flourishing
complementarianism looks like in our life.
and how it flourishes. Is that, and why I'm encourage women to not be afraid of submission to a man who is submitting to the Lord, because your deepest desire is to love the Lord and to see me flourish in my walk with the Lord. And I couldn't ask for more than that. Is when we see that I'm struggling, I'm overwhelmed, I'm tired, I'm not loving you the way I should, or the kids. You're quick to be able to say, okay, what do you need to step back, to get time with the Lord, to build your relationship. And I will take on the responsibility. You say that you will take on the responsibility that I have been carrying. Right? And so, there's that complementarian of it's up to you, which I don't envy that responsibility. Maybe that's yeah. And so, but then you're living in the creation of being the leader. I'm living in the creation of being a helper, someone that you need to continue to build up our family and church, and like we are both needed. But if I'm trying to do your job, trying to live outside of my giftings, outside of my role, that's just a burden that crushes me eventually. Even if I can lead, I can rule over our household. Actually, there's a very real desire in my sinful heart, because that's like from the fall that Eve will have the desire to rule over her husband. Like, I have to fight through that sometimes. Like, wait, no, like, I'm trying to rule over Patrick right now. But if I continue to do that, it will crush me. But part of that is like, I prayerfully chose you as my husband because I like trusted that you would be like a leader and authority that I could follow, you know? So I think that's why, like, don't enter into marriage lightly, because it's challenging. But in a bigger role, idea of like church too, like you want to enter into a church and like be a member of a church where you can trust the pastors, you can trust the elders as men who are laying their life down for their flock. And so it's not like, I don't think complementarian is meant to be an oppressive, like, you have to stay in line and don't speak, and like, but it's really meant like pastors and elders, like, again, that word is the same, right? So like the men in the church who are leading are meant to take women and children and elevate them in such a way of like, you are worthy in the sight of the Lord. You are meant to, like, we come alongside you as family, support you, love you, and not be like, oh, you are a woman, so I'm actually not going to listen to what you have to say. Does that make sense? Like, there's a difference between the flourishing.
Go for it.
Good. I think that something that we're talking about too is like the like Christ-centered focus is so foolish to the world. They can't understand. But it's like the husband is like sacrificing himself in leadership for his wife, and the wife is sacrificing herself in submission for her husband. And they're both seeking to follow the self-sacrificial model of Christ by seeking the good of the other. And so they're dying to self for their spouse. And like, as like God shows us, like, Jesus died for our flourishing. And so it's contrary to the idea of the world. So that complementarianism looks like foolishness. But we see like it actually brings about flourishing as spouses die to self to care for each other.
That's great. And I think the leadership you're talking about, that sacrificial, self-serving leadership is so important, because there's two mistakes that are made in leadership. One is domineering, which is dominance, control. And this is what people, I think, are often concerned about with complementarianism, is the husband is going to rule harshly over his wife. Like, that is possible. I wouldn't call that God's design. I would just call that domineering. Yeah. Like domineering over those in your charge, which is 1 Peter 5, talking to elders. And that's not healthy, because it's taking the authority and using an iron fist to rule. The other one is passivity, which is, I'm actually not going to lead. I'm not going to step in. I'm just going to let things slide. And I think that's kind of what you see with Adam in the garden. Yep. Like, he should be ruling over. What should Adam have done? He should have crushed the head of the serpent and thrown it out of the garden. Yep. Like, that's what you do. And that's what Christ did as the ultimate leader. Like, that's what a husband should do when he sees his household being attacked. And so, those two mistakes, there's sacrificial service, which is what we're called to as in leadership. There's a way of lording it over others, which Jesus calls this Gentile leadership. It's like, this is the way the Gentiles do it. He points that out. The non-Christians, the non-Jews. And then there's passivity. And I think that what our culture has done, and I said this earlier, but before we started, is I think our culture is pushing men away from being domineering by embracing passivity. And I think that's a lot of the fallout we're seeing in our culture. Because I think men are afraid to lead. Yep. They're afraid of being, these oppressive, terrible leaders, which it's very possible for them to be. I mean, you see terrible examples of that in our culture. Andrew Tate, whatever.
Yeah, that's the backlash, is like, there are people who are like, well, you shouldn't be passive, so you should be domineering.
And it's like, oh, that's a bad solution.
Oh, you made the same error in the opposite direction.
Yeah, it's like we need a new example of what it means to be human and what it means to be a man who is a leader. And that's Christ. And that's like sacrificial service. And so we cannot solve the issues with domineering, with passivity in our culture. And I think that's why why would we make a podcast that might be slightly rubbing some feathers the wrong way? I don't think that's even a phrase.
Ruffling some feathers.
Rubbing, we'll go with. No.
You still say it wrong.
Because I actually think that we are not going to get ourselves out of this situation. Like, and this is where it's like, I think a lot of times in our culture we think of men versus women. Like, are you a feminist and you're for women, or are you for the young man? It's like, you can't have either flourishing without the other. Like, when young women suffer, young men suffer. When young men suffer, young women suffer. Like, you can't just divorce humanity from one another like that. And so the solution to our culture of young men just don't be oppressors is not enough. Like, it's far from enough. It's like, young men serve and sacrifice in love for the bettering of others. That's what it's needed.
Yeah, because even though, you're right to say the thing Adam should have done is crush the head of the serpent. And the thing he should have done, even after Eve ate the fruit, is he should have gone to God and say, I will die for her. For it was my responsibility. And that's what Christ does on behalf of his bride. Is he actually goes and he, in a single moment, bears the penalty for his bride on the cross and crushes the head of the serpent so that his bride could live in holiness forever. And that's the incredible thing about Christ is it's all the fulfillment of what we want in masculinity. And that's the goal we're striving for. And at the same time, there's these beautiful pictures of femininity throughout the scriptures. Of the books that are written solely as character studies on the holy female character are incredible. And we don't catch this as much in
Ruth, Esther.
Yeah, but in the English ordering of the Old Testament is different than the Jewish ordering of the Old Testament. That's Patrick getting real canonical nerdy for a second. In the Jewish ordering of the Old Testament, the book that comes after Proverbs, and Proverbs 31, where it presents the idealized, archetypical woman, the book that comes after that is Ruth. Because the Jewish authors wanted you to see how Ruth is that character played out in a real story.
The Proverbs 31 woman.
Yeah, Ruth is the Proverbs 31 woman in real life. Yeah. And so there are reasons that we can talk about on another podcast on canonicity. But I think that's
the Bible
so
we have
sweet.
is great.
It is. There are reasons.
There are just different orders you can read it in.
But all that to say, it's like, oh man, you have these incredible examples of masculinity and femininity that are so different than what our culture is offering right now. How do you think about how to respond to even the models for the ladies' femininity? And because we just talked a little bit about how do we respond to the bad models of masculinity. How do you respond to that in our culture with scriptural examples?
I'm so ready.
Oh,
man.
Yes!
That's the right question.
So glad. I didn't even prep.
I just think about this a lot. I saw Mary the other day. How, Mary, first of all, she's so submissive to the will of the Lord. Trusting, faithful. But then, Mary is content with the life that she leads. And she is the mother of God. And, she bears the Savior. And what does she do? She just, raises him, has other kids, is faithful to her husband. She doesn't really, I don't know, she's not a celebrity. And so it's just think about, she is, faithful in the area that she's in. And she's not she's, a gentle and quiet spirit. That, First Peter talks about. And, I'm thinking through, here, in Titus 2, starting in verse 4, and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working at home, kind, and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. So, like, back to, like, making the word of God beautiful. And, like, how does that, like, practically play out? There's so many ways. But, like, it can look like contentment. It can look like being content with the humble, like, mundane, like, unnoticed life. Because I've been thinking about this as a mom, as a stay-at-home mom. The other day I was, like, doing dishes, and I was like, oh, like, dishes are so boring. Like, you know, and I'd had these friends over who were both, like, career women, and I was like, oh, they're, like, doing, like, this stuff, and, like, they're gonna be so important, and, like, I'm just doing some more dishes. And, like, the Lord, like, impressed upon me, like, oh, like, this is the important work. And for me to die to self, to die to, like, my desire for, like, the approval of man and, like, the approval of the world and, like, glory for myself, but to die to that and have a self-sacrificial care for, like, my husband, for my family, for the people in our church. And there's, like, so many ways that can look. But it doesn't mean, like, every woman needs to be a stay-at-home mom. But just thinking about, like, what does it look for me as a woman to follow after Jesus in his, like, before he started his ministry, he lived in, like, he lived as an unknown, in humility, faithfully following God. Like, how can I pursue that? Like, humility, contentment, and service, knowing that, like, my reward is in heaven. And not, like, rah-rah, like, I'm a woman who, like, smashed the ladder and, like, not the ladder, the ceiling, and, like, you know, like, stamped my imprint on the world and, like, left this legacy of, like, can I trust God with that? Can I trust him? And so, like, practically, like, just thinking about, like, what are ways that I as a woman can bless the people around me? Like, and that can look like anything from, like, hey, my home is a place that's welcoming for people where I can minister to them. Like, I think, like, Tina does such a good job of this. Anytime I walk into their living room, I just feel, like, cozy. Like,
because it's a tight space.
It's relaxing.
It's really
relaxing.
Thank you, Hannah. That's really
The lights are warm, and I'm like, oh, this is the place where you can, like, share your heart, and, like, Tina will listen to you and care for you. And, like, she's like a mother, you know. It's like,
she just did a hugging motion.
Yeah, and so I think about, like, there's so many giftings that, like, bring about beauty. Or I think about a friend of ours who, like, her husband was not a believer, and, like, she just, like, prayed and prayed and prayed for him and finally came to Christ. And it was like, oh, like, she talked to him, but also the way she lived her life was beautiful and appealing to him. And the way that she was living made him want to follow Jesus. Like, what a beautiful influence. I think when we talk about men's and women's roles, like, for men's roles, it can be really easy to, like, list them out of, like, this is what it looks like to, like, serve as a husband, you know, and I say it's, like, pros. When it comes to women's roles, it's more nebulous because it's, like, poetry, where it's like, oh, like, there's, like, you create beauty and life, and, like, you, like, are appointed at your home. Well, it doesn't mean you have to be at home, like a stay-at-home mom, but, like, so, like, people get a lot of confusion because they're like, what is it, like, really? You know, and, like, John Piper has this whole, like, essay about, like, what they can look like, and it's a lot more, like, specific on the man's side, because it's just easier. But, like, poetry, you know, you like, have to, like, have, like, an interpretation. There's, like,
creativity.
There's mystery and beauty, and, like, there's mystery and beauty in God, and, like, we as women get to, like, kind of show that. Expose it, yeah.
That's such a great line. The difference between prose and poetry.
Yeah.
It's like even like the structure and the life that Patrick
Yeah.
gave, or the trellis and the vine that's often used.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that, like, there's so much more nuance when it comes to, like you're talking about,
Yeah.
what does this really look like? Because you can't just be like, it means that you're always at home. You know, it's like
bacon bread.
you're a stay-at-home mom. It's like, well, because you can also do this as a single woman.
Yeah.
And so, what does it look like as a single woman? And that's, well, I don't know why I just went so what does it look like as a single woman? Like, because it could look really different. An example that's often given is Kenyon, who's
Love her.
she's the best. She
Shout out to Kenyon, who probably will never hear this.
following the Lord in Southeast Asia, and just unbelievably qualified as oil mechanic, engineer. You know, gets flown in to do these massive projects. But the way that she has poured out her life into younger women is unbelievable. She has lived humbly, faithfully. She lives in a flat. If we were British, we would say that.
Small apartment.
Small apartment for the American audience who listens to this podcast. Lives in a flat with other women. Younger women who are students and things like that, because she wants to influence their lives. So the ways that she created a home while pursuing excellence in her field, like beyond any success that any of us will ever have.
She is the boss babe.
Yeah.
Like, there have so many like women I talk to who want to advance in the career. Like, Kenyon did it. Like, she got to the top where most men would be, but she did not lose that femininity of caring for those around her. Bringing people in, sharing her life. Yeah. And, just that there's a beauty that both can be done. Now, and then it gets, like you said, a little more difficult to define, especially when women get married and if the Lord blesses them with children. Because moms can still work, but it just becomes very difficult to kind of define, like, how do you do both and do them well and what the Lord's asked you to do.
And a lot of the way we even think about work, Patrick can fill me in on this one. A lot of the ways we think about work is really unique too, because so much of history, the home was much more a place of industry.
Yes.
You kind of get that vibe, if we're using the word vibe, from it's in. There's you get that vibe if you read Proverbs 31. Like, the woman is very active in industry, and yet what happened, Patrick, with the Industrial Revolution? This is a friendly setup for him.
This is one of my favorite feminist arguments. Yeah. Is we read in a theological anthropology class I took with Joe Rigney at Bethlehem. Just to give it credibility, we read this article by this feminist about how the Industrial Revolution ruined female identity. Because what it did is it took all of the meaningful work that had been happening in the home with husband and wife together with their kids, and it exported all of it out, or it just got rid of it. That, like, all of the things that defined work in the home either got taken out or they became much less because machines could do it. Or machines could do it in a factory, and the husband had to go to the factory or to the mine or to these other places, and then eventually the office to, like, do all of these things. And work and life got separated in a way that was never the case before. Like, the reality of most men having an office was a strange thing. That, like, the presidential office is in the home the president and his family live in, because that's how all of life was for everybody. You lived where you worked. That was how it went for most of the time, unless you were, like, on you were a merchant who, like, went to a store. But even, like, most, even
or a soldier going to war.
Yeah, or a soldier going to war. But it's like most of the time. But even then, like, the idea of professional armies is a post-industrial revolution idea. That, like, before then, it was just like, whenever you had a war, everyone just, like, went and, like, men just went and fought the war and then went back home. You just did war and then you went back to your real job. Yeah. Like, that was how war happened until the Industrial Revolution. And so just all of these ideas that we have about work and life are so new to human history and so different and we can't go back, obviously. But it's important for us to realize, like, okay, there are really significant differences that we need to grapple with meaningfully. And even to say, like, so Tina and I bought a new car. And this was one of my favorite things about, like, how silly sometimes things like this play out. And as we were buying the car, there was a page where the guy kind of skipped over that needed some signatures. And we were like, what's that? And he was like, well, it's for Wisconsin. Because in Wisconsin, a wife can't buy a car without her husband's permission. Still.
Whoa.
Which is just wild to me. And I'm like... Yeah.
I was wondering, I'm like, so are you saying that if we were in Wisconsin right now, I couldn't do this by myself? And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay, well, I wouldn't want to because that's my personality. I wanted to, but it just is like, that's just crazy that there's still a state in the U.S. that a woman can't go buy a car without her husband's permission.
Well, and my biggest problem with that is the Bible. Because in Proverbs 31, she goes out, she sees a field, and she buys it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have like a little parenthetical comment to be like, and then she asked her husband's permission after seeing the field, and then she bought it with his permission. It's like, no, that's like, she's not waffling around. So anyway, Wisconsin, that's my problem with that law, is the Bible.
And I think, Tina, you put out such a helpful distinction of, like, it's not like either of you were about to buy a car without the other one.
Yeah.
Totally.
You know, and so even there of, like, because it would be weird if you bought a car without talking to Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless if Patrick was like, hey, can you go get a car? Here's $50,000, you know?
As I casually have.
No, it would be weird.
When Patrick does that all the time.
Or Patrick's same way. Like, if you
Yeah.
tried to surprise me with a car, you know, I'd be furious.
Yeah.
We did not talk
These were not the Honda days that I wanted.
Exactly.
Oh, so good.
So, there is a difference.
Yeah, it's weird.
But I was just thinking as Hannah was talking to, like, we probably need to have a whole nother podcast of what femininity is.
Yeah,
biblical femininity.
Yeah.
Because it is so broad, it is so different, deep, wonderful, beautiful, but not clear. And so, because I do think biblical masculinity, biblical femininity are key parts of complementarianism. And so we keep kind of skirting around it. We talk a little bit about it, but I think it's so much more. But then also to say that complementarian values both men and women in our distinct creation.
Yeah.
And I think the metaphor that's been so helpful to me over the years to describe complementarianism is men as heads and women as hearts. So this headship and heartship that each of the genders exercise in the life of the family and in the life of the church. That there is a real direction. There is a leadership that happens from the head of like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. But there's a life and an interdependence and a necessary feedback that happens from the heart. That the head without a heart is just gross.
Yeah.
and it's just like, oh, there's such a clear interdependence here. That, like, as decisions are made, they're made in this context of feedback and wisdom and counsel. And that's why the wise wife is an incredible gift in the Proverbs. Because she's the most important counselor to her husband.
Abigail.
Oh, Abigail.
Yeah.
Abigail's
Wait, I have a
the
great
best.
example.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, well, I was at the TGC conference a few years ago, and I was in a...
Gospel Coalition.
Yeah, Gospel Coalition, and I was in a session with Mike and Melissa Kruger, and I asked a question about the subject, and Melissa Kruger was like, oh, well, it's not like Mike goes into a closet and he plans our family vacation, and then he comes out and he's like, here it is, this is what we're doing, because it wouldn't work, like, as a family, like, so it's like, oh, Mike's still, like, leading, but, like, him and Melissa are, like, coordinating with one another. They, like, you know, the decision is not just, like, Mike's like, I'm not going to the Bahamas. You know, it's, like, they, like, work together. And so, like, she was trying to explain that in the context of, like, church leadership, where she was like, it's not just, like, the elders go in a room and they come out and, like, this is what it's going to be. But it's, like, no, like, the women, the spiritual mothers of the church influence in, like Patrick was saying, there's like conversation between the head and the heart,
Mm-hmm.
and the church moves forward in unity. And so if you have just one or the other leading the way, it doesn't go well.
Yeah, like when the elders are in a room by themselves and aren't
Mm-hmm.
taking in the congregation's thoughts or meanings,
Mm-hmm.
that's when disaster can strike. Like they need to be in the body, be with the people to know like what's going on, and then to lead them. To not sit passively or try to, it's not the same, or be domineering about it, but yeah, like you're saying, to work.
Or to know there's something the body needs,
Yes.
and then to be willing to take the sacrifice of a hard decision.
Yeah.
And I think this is a helpful illustration here, because head and heart or head and body, it's like that imagery is like the husband's the head of the wife, and you get this idea of like headship. What does that mean? And that receptivity, that response, I think is a really helpful way to think about it. And where feedback breaks down is where you end up with, that's, because sometimes people are like, well, complementarian, does that mean the husband just makes all the decisions? Like, no, because that would be weird and unhelpful. And I think it's more the dynamic of leadership. The illustration my parents give, and I think my parents have done a great job of this, because if you know my mom, you know she is strong-willed, she's passionate, she's loving, she's kind, she has emotion in such healthy and beautiful ways, and she deeply respects my father. And so she's not a steamrolled woman who can't speak her mind. Like, that is not her.
Not at all.
If like that would be a horrendous misrepresentation of her. And my dad is loving, compassionate, kind, but he's a leader. He's a visionary. He's clear in what he's doing. And the illustration that they give, and I really appreciate it, is it's like in dancing. When a couple dances, there is a responsibility of the man to lead his partner in dancing. And there's like a subtlety to that. And if a man and woman are dancing and the man isn't leading, there's confusion, there's like missteps, there's going to be, bonking into one another or drifting apart. I'm no expert, but I know at least that. And yet if he leads violently and thrashes her around, then it's like, this is not look good. Like, this is no longer beautiful. He's not highlighting her beauty. It's not enjoyable. She doesn't want to be a part of that. And so there's like passivity, violence, and domineering. But what's actually needed is like gentle, intentional, purposeful leadership. And that is like a responsiveness physically to like her embodied state. Like, okay, now like we step this way, we're going this way. And it's also knowing her giftings, knowing her abilities. Like, can she do, jazz, whatever, like a 360 spin or, flip? Or is it better to do, like
a small dip?
Like there's a wisdom in leadership in that aspect. And I think that image of dancing is helpful because it gives a picture, in a sense, of the beauty. And a good male dancing partner will highlight the beauty of the woman he's dancing with. And that is how we should think of his role. The leading patiently, kindly, but intentionally, so that it's not ambiguous. And with sensitivity to both their abilities and needs.
Yeah. I think there are so many other ways we could go with this.
I know, I want to get back to the Industrial
the idea of
Revolution.
femininity, Industrial Revolution. I'm like, there's a whole solar system
Applies to the church.
analogy.
Can I give a thought on this?
Yeah.
So here's why we're going to release this, because this is not the perfect episode on this. But it's a conversation we desperately need as a culture. And if this gets you like one step down the road, we'll applaud that. And so it's like a conversation we desperately need. I think there's a lot of confusion. And I think that's within our culture and within the church. And we're trying to lead from a place of, hey, we're still learning in the process of this. But this is a really important conversation. Like I was saying, it's actually a distinctive of how we're going to view it. And it's been said, I'm going to rephrase it. It's been said that what were the first 2 centuries of church history about, Patrick?
The first millennia.
Yeah.
The first 2 millennia of church history.
1,000 years.
I would say the first millennia was really about who is the person of Christ.
Yeah, Christology.
And the second millennia is how are we saved by him.
Yeah, soteriology.
Yeah. And really, are you going to get into what we think the third millennia is going to be about?
Yeah, I can do it. You can do it. But basically, the idea is in the third millennium, there's obviously more that we're teasing through. There's probably ecclesiology you could put in the second millennium, but what is the third millennium? One of the big issues we need to answer is anthropology. Who are we as humans? What does it mean to be male and female, made in the image of God? And I think that's what a lot of Christians are grappling with right now in our culture. What does it actually mean to be male and female, made in the image of God? And I think that's one of the reasons why theological declarations are coming out and will be coming out around what it means to be male and female is because there's a need for clarity on this issue.
Which the Nashville Declaration, and so because this is such a big conversation, I'm actually going to put 3 books in the show description.
Perfect.
For people to, if they want to pick them up. 2 of them are actually free right now to download online. So that's fun. The first one is What's the Difference by John Piper. That's a short one. It's like a 100-page booklet, really.
That's the one I was referencing.
Great. It's so good. It's so readable. And he gets into a lot of the details in the text that we just didn't have time today to get to. The second book, which isn't free, but I think is a good next step, is The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller, which I think people are like slow to want to read because they're like, oh, it's about marriage. I need to be thinking about marriage. But the way that book came together was it was a series of sermons on marriage meant for single people to hear. And so it's a great book on what do men and women look like in living together in the marriage relationship. And then the last book I'm going to put up there, which is also free to download right now, is, and it's going to feel a little left field, is Leadership and Emotional Sabotage by Joe Rigby. Because I think he really helpfully gets into how does this dynamic of leadership really work itself out healthily between men and women in families, in churches, and in the world. So those are the 3 books I'm going to put out. What's the Difference and Leadership and Emotional Sabotage are free to download right now.
Nice.
As of
December
4th. So,
2024.
Have fun. And then, there's a Nashville statement that we can talk more about that clarifies a lot of these things. But again, this is a conversation that's really big. And I'm so grateful for you all for joining us today to have it. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for allowing us to come. Just
I had to make this show.
You have to, at some point.
it was fun to be here with you guys.
It was. I really enjoyed talking about this topic.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be back probably next week. Yeah, I don't see why not next week. Soon. We'll be back next time to keep talking through the distinctives of what Crown Hill Church is going to be. Thanks for listening.